My mother-in-law used the excuse that her air conditioning broke during a historic heat wave to move into our luxury apartment for a few days to cool off. Who would have thought she would plant herself there for a solid month, refusing to leave? It wasn't until my husband secretly drove back to her neighborhood to check on the house that he discovered a horrifying truth. Ladies and gentlemen, it all started on a Friday evening. Los Angeles was baking under a brutal late July heat wave. In our luxury high-rise condominium on the 15th floor in downtown LA, I had just finished arranging a vase of fresh white lilies. I took a sip of iced herbal tea, gently rubbed my belly, and visualized the little life that would soon bless this home. My husband, Kevin, was bustling around in the kitchen, preparing a lemon herb roast chicken and organic asparagus for us. Everything was quiet, fulfilling, and perfect, exact the way a 3-2-year-old expectant mother wants it to be. But then, the sharp chime of the doorbell shattered the tranquility. Kevin hastily wiped his hands on his apron and jogged to the door. Standing in the living room, the smile on my face instantly froze. Looming in the doorway was my mother-in-law, Susan. She didn't come empty-handed. She was lugging a massive, battered, faded Samsonite suitcase, the kind you'd pack for a month-long overseas trip. Her forehead was beaded with sweat. Her face was twisted into a permanent scowl, and her sharp eyes did a quick sweep of our condo before locking onto me. "Mom? What are you doing here? Why didn't you text me so I could come get you down in the lobby?" Kevin stumbled over his words, his face a mix of shock and confusion as he rushed to take the heavy suitcase from her. Susan swatted her son's hand away and shoved the suitcase hard across the imported European oak floor, producing a screeching sound that made my stomach drop. She began fanning herself aggressively with a junk mail flyer, panting with her signature high-pitched, grating voice. "Call? Why would I call? So you two could lock the door and pretend you aren't home? The power grid in my neighborhood has been doing rolling blackouts since noon, and my AC is completely shot. It's 110 degrees out there. I'm staying here to escape the heat for a few days. With an apartment this massive, I'm sure Harper won't be petty enough to nickel and dime her own mother-in-law over an extra plate at the dinner table, right?" Before she even finished her sentence, her eyes pinned me down, daring me to challenge her. I took a deep breath, swallowing the frustration rising in my throat, and forced a polite smile. "Why would you say that, Susan? Go wash up and cool down. Dinner is just about ready." Kevin made roast chicken. I am a woman who believes in clear boundaries. I married Kevin when he had absolutely nothing to his name except a mountain of student debt and extraordinary work ethic. This condo was the result of 7 years of our literal blood, sweat, and tears, working grueling corporate jobs, plus a small down payment loan from my parents. Kevin's family, specifically Susan, hadn't contributed a single dime. On the day we hosted our housewarming party, she showed up with a cheap bottle of supermarket wine, scoffed at our high-rise, calling it an overpriced birdcage, and loudly proclaimed that if there was a fire, we'd be trapped. Yet now, when she needed a place to live comfortably, she waltzed in like a queen, inspecting her conquered territory. Without waiting to be invited to sit, Susan kicked off her orthopedic sandals, walking barefoot across the floor, her eyes darting through the hallway. When she reached the spare bedroom at the corner, her eyes lit up. This was the room I had poured my heart into. It was painted a soft sage green, furnished with a high-end restoration hardware crib, a matching dresser, and soft plush toys. We were preparing it for our first baby. The room was spacious, filled with natural light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'm taking this room," Susan declared flatly, already dragging her suitcase into the center of the nursery. Kevin panicked and chased after her. "Mom, wait. We're setting this room up for the baby. Harper has everything organized in here. You can take my home office. I'll set up the premium air mattress for you. The AC in there works great." Hearing her son say this, Susan's face darkened, her eyebrows knitted together tightly. She slammed her hand against the side of the expensive wooden crib and snapped, "Oh, please. The kid isn't even born yet, and you're already acting like royalty. I birthed you and your brother in a cramped apartment with no central air, and did either of you die? Have you two gone crazy from having too much money? I am your mother. I gave you life. Now that I am old and frail, Are you telling me I am worth less than a fetus that isn't even fully formed? You expect me to sleep on a glorified pool float in a tiny office? If you really care, throw this useless junk out into the hall. With that, she didn't hesitate to snatch the organic cotton baby blankets out of the crib and toss them onto the floor. She kicked the fluffy white rug aside, unzipped her suitcase, and began dumping wrinkled clothes that reeked of mothballs all over the pristine daybed I had just set up. I stood leaning against the doorframe, watching my mother-in-law trample over the delicate things I had so lovingly prepared. A wave of resentment choked me. I was about to open my mouth and fire back, but Kevin turned to me, his eyes bleeding, silently shaking his head. He was a dutiful son, a good husband. I knew he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Fine. Let me pack up the baby's things. You can rest in here, Susan, I replied coldly. I stepped into the room, picked up every tiny item, smoothed them out, and packed them into a cardboard box. My mother-in-law smirked triumphantly, pulling out a bottle of menthol rub and slathering it on her temples. That sharp, medicinal smell instantly overpowered the elegant scent of the lilies in the living room. Thus, the first day of the hurricane named mother-in-law officially made landfall in our condo. Contrary to Kevin's prediction of her staying for a few days to beat the heat, Susan's presence showed zero signs of ending. She began establishing the regime of an uncrowned queen, where I was implicitly treated as nothing more than an unpaid maid. The suppressed anger burning in my chest was fueled daily by her brazen hypocrisy. My mother-in-law is 60 years old. To call her frail is a joke, she is in better shape than I am. Her arms are toned, her complexion is healthy, and she doesn't even need reading glasses. Every day around 4:30 p.m., when the LA sun began to dip, she would change into her Lululemon knockoffs, lace up her sneakers, grab a Stanley cup, and head down to the luxury amenity deck. There, she seamlessly integrated herself into a clique of wealthy retirees. She power walked, did water aerobics, and showed off a stamina that made a 70-year-old woman green with envy. She would loudly boast to anyone who would listen that her son was a tech CEO. Kevin was just a mid-level project manager, and her daughter-in-law was a hotshot executive, claiming we begged her to move into our luxury building so we could properly pamper her. She painted the perfect picture of a beloved, fulfilled matriarch. But the second she stepped back over our threshold and the heavy wooden door clicked shut, Susan morphed into a completely different person, a chronically disabled patient. She would sprawl out on my custom cream-colored leather sofa, resting her sweaty, unwashed feet right on my pristine throw pillows. Harper, get me an iced water with lemon. Make sure it's filtered water, not from the tap. And put a splash of agave in it, her voice echoed from the living room every single day like clockwork. When I brought it to her, before I could even set it down, she would lazily point her finger. While you're at it, slice up some of those organic peaches for me. Oh, my back is killing me, my joints are aching so badly. It must be that cheap mattress you put me on. I worked at a high-pressure tech PR firm from 8:00 a.m. to 6:00 p.m., battling demanding clients and crushing corporate quotas. I would come home exhausted, my feet aching, my stomach empty, yet I still had to roll up my sleeves and cook dinner. I had never uttered a word of complaint because I valued our home. But Susan's sheer audacity was eroding my last ounce of patience. The breaking point came on a Friday evening during her third week with us. I had intentionally left work early and went to Whole Foods to buy the best ingredients. I spent 2 hours cooking a lavish meal: pan-seared wild-caught salmon, garlic mashed potatoes, roasted Brussels sprouts with balsamic glaze, and a fresh arugula salad. I was certain that no matter how picky she was, she couldn't find a flaw in this dinner. The three of us sat at the kitchen island. Susan glared at the spread, her lips curling into a sneer. She took her fork, poked aggressively at the salmon, flaking it apart before dropping her fork with a clatter. This salmon is dry and overcooked. Did you buy this frozen? If I eat this, I'll get an upset stomach. Where did you even buy this garbage, letting them rip you off like a fool? I took a deep breath and kept my voice soft. Susan, I promise you, I bought it fresh from the seafood counter today. It's perfectly cooked. She ignored me, moving her fork to the mashed potatoes. She took one bite, grimaced, and dramatically spit it out into a napkin, yelling, "Good Lord, it's like eating a salt block. How do you even cook? Are you trying to kill me by spiking my blood pressure? This tastes like dog food, salty, bland, a total mess. If you were a wife in my day, your husband would have thrown you out on the street the first week." Silverware clattered against plates. The air in the room froze solid. Kevin, who had been eating quietly, put down his fork, his face turning gray. "Mom. Harper works all day and comes home exhausted just to cook for us. If it's not to your taste, I'll make you a sandwich. But you don't need to speak to my wife that way. It's hurtful." "Oh, so now you're taking your wife's side?" Susan slammed her hand on the quartz countertop, her eyes wide and furious. "I birthed you, I raised you, and now you throw your own mother under the bus for some woman? I said it's salty, so it's salty. I'm criticizing her so she can improve, and you're acting like I'm the villain?" With that, she casually grabbed the bottle of hot sauce from the center of the table and dumped half the bottle directly over the beautiful seared salmon I had spent hours preparing. "There. At least it has some flavor now. I'll just starve. You two enjoy your meal." She stood up violently, stomped down the hallway, and slammed the bedroom door shut. I sat frozen on my bar stool, looking at the ruined meal, the salmon now a bright, chemical red. A profound, consuming rage swelled within me. I didn't shed a single tear. To me, tears are only for those who deserve them. I quietly stood up, picked up the ruined plates of food, and dumped them straight into the trash can in front of my husband. I knew exactly where my boundaries were, and Susan was systematically stomping all over them. That night, the air in our master bedroom was suffocating. The dim amber light off the bedside lamp cast shadows on Kevin's exhausted, hollow face. He sat on the edge of the mattress, his rough, warm hands kneading my tense shoulders. His fingers ran through my hair, accompanied by a heavy, drawn-out sigh. "Honey, I'm so sorry." Kevin's voice was hoarse, thick with emotion. "I know you're miserable. She's getting older, her temper is completely erratic. Please, just try to ignore her. Give me a little more time. I'll figure out a gentle way to ask her to go back home." I turned around and looked deep into my husband's bloodshot eyes. I wasn't mad at him, my heart broke for him. I reached out and stroked his lean cheek, my voice cold but perfectly clear. "Kevin, I've put up with this because I love you, not because I'm afraid of her. But look at the reality. She has no intention of leaving. And why is she doing this? Because she knows you've gritted your teeth and endured her insane behavior since you were a little boy, right?" My words acted like a needle popping a water balloon that had been swelling inside Kevin for decades. His shoulders slumped entirely. He buried his face in his hands, his broad shoulders shaking slightly. In the quiet room, only the hum of the central air could be heard. Kevin finally began to pour out his heart, uncovering the dark corners of a childhood he had always tried to bury. "Harper. Do you know that when I was a kid, I honestly thought I was adopted or picked up from a dumpster?" Kevin laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. He explained how in his family, his older brother, Tyler, was the golden child, while Kevin was the disposable spare. His mother's favoritism was extraordinarily cruel. If they had takeout pizza, Tyler was automatically given the meat lover slices, while Kevin was handed the plain, burnt crusts. If they had a steak night, Tyler got the fillet, and Kevin got the gristle. If Kevin ever dared to reach for a better piece, Susan would smack the back of his hand with a wooden spoon, leaving a red welt. "Leave that for your brother. He needs brain food for his studies. You're slow. So eat the cheap stuff so you can get used to working a blue-collar job." That blatant favoritism grew into something monstrous over the years. The year Tyler barely graduated high school and enrolled in a local community college, Susan took out a second mortgage on her house just to buy Tyler a brand new Ford Mustang so he wouldn't lose face in front of his fraternity brothers. When it was Kevin's turn, when he got accepted into UCLA's highly competitive computer science program, she tossed him a $50 bill and said, "College is a scam anyway. I'm out of money. Figure it out yourself." For 4 years of college, Kevin rode a rusted, second-hand bicycle, worked night shifts as a line cook, and tutored high schoolers. During the winter, he wore a thin, cheap hoodie, shivering at bus stops. Yet, every single month, Susan would call him, screaming and demanding he send her a portion of his tip money to help support Tyler, who refused to get a job because it interfered with his networking. There were nights I was riding my bike in the pouring rain, and my tears just mixed with the rainwater. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong to make my own mother hate me so much? Kevin's voice choked up, a rare tear rolling down the cheek of the strongest man I knew. But Harper, she's still my mom. No matter what. I felt this obligation. I thought if I just worked hard, built a good life, and provided for her, maybe she'd finally look at me and love me, just once. Hearing my husband's soul-crushing confession, my heart physically ached. It hugged him tightly, letting him bury his head in my shoulder. The indignation inside me transformed into a cold, rational flame. Susan had spent her entire life weaponizing Kevin's desperation for a mother's love to manipulate him, drain him, and use fake tears to trample his self-esteem. She viewed his kindness as free labor, and our hard-earned home as a goldmine to fund her blind obsession with her oldest son. Kevin, you don't owe her anything. You have done more than enough, I whispered in his ear, my voice hardening with absolute resolve. But duty and love have to be placed where they are deserved. Starting tomorrow, I am done backing down. This is our family, and I am going to protect it. A full month passed since the day Susan dragged her Samsonite into our home. A month sounds short, but for me, it felt like a century in a psychological prison. The air in our luxury condo was so thick and suffocating, it felt like lighting a single match would blow the place to pieces. Susan hadn't mentioned a single word about returning to her house in the valley. The ridiculous excuse of a power outage had long been forgotten. She treated our place like a 5-star, all-inclusive resort. She'd wake up late, shuffle around in her slippers, order me to steam her clothes, and demand I cook her breakfast. In the afternoon, she'd head down to the amenities deck. At night, she'd sprawl on the sofa, cranking the TV volume to the max, completely ignoring that Kevin and I had splitting headaches from grueling 10-hour workdays. But I started noticing bizarre red flags. Recently, Susan had become incredibly secretive with her iPhone. Every time it rang, she would snatch it up, look around nervously, slide the balcony glass door shut behind her, and speak in hushed, frantic whispers. A few times, I saw her walk out of the guest bathroom with her eyes red and puffy from crying, but the second she spotted me, or Kevin, she would immediately pivot to complaining about the water pressure to mask her panic. The intuition of a woman told me that behind my mother-in-law's arrogant facade, a filthy secret was being hidden. It happened on a Tuesday night. A rare summer thunderstorm was battering the floor-to-ceiling windows. Dinner was served in suffocating silence. The clinking of forks against porcelain was the only sound. Kevin kept his head down, eating mechanically. Susan, per her usual routine, was picking through the organic rotisserie chicken, taking the best breast meat and tossing the skin and bones back onto the serving platter in disgust. I set my fork down and wiped my mouth with a linen napkin. The calm inside me was like a block of ice. I looked directly at my mother-in-law, my voice incredibly smooth and soft. Yet every word was delivered like a poisoned blade. Susan, last month you said your AC broke and the grid was down, which is why you came to stay with us. With this massive storm, it's definitely cooled a fover in the valley. But I keep wondering. I intentionally dragged out the silence, my unblinking eyes pinned on her face. Tyler's house is practically walking distance from yours. He's got that massive 5-bedroom McMansion with dual-zone central air. Why didn't you go stay with him? You'd be closer to your neighborhood friends. Up here in this birdcage, it's so isolated. You don't save your bingo group. Are you and Tyler having a fight? My question was delivered with razor-sharp logic. It struck directly at Susan's ultimate Achilles heel, the absolute perfection of her golden child. I clearly saw her hand freeze in midair. The fork in her grip trembled violently. Her sharp eyes dropped to the table for a split second before shooting wide open in horror. All the color drained from her face, leaving hairish white, before a dark, embarrassed red flooded her cheeks like she had just been slapped across the face. Extreme guilt was written all over her wrinkled features, even as she scrambled to disguise it with rage. Kevin looked up, stunned. He knew I rarely initiated conflict, but this time, my question was too logical, so logical that he found himself silently asking the exact same thing. He turned to his mother, waiting for an answer. Silence swallowed the kitchen for 3 agonizing seconds. But in those 3 seconds, I felt Susan's defensive perimeter completely collapse. And instead of answering with logic, she chose the classic tactic of a cornered animal. She attacked with sheer hysteria. Clang! Susan slammed her fork down onto the marble counter, so hard it chipped the plate. She stood up violently, knocking her heavy bar stool backward until it crashed onto the floor. Her chest heaved, her face flushed crimson, and the veins in her neck popped out like green cords. Are you kicking me out? Susan shrieked, her voice cracking. Her trembling index finger pointed right at my face. You ungrateful, disrespectful bitch. You think because you make a little tech money and live in this glass cage that you can look down on your mother-in-law? I have bitten my tongue for a month. How much of your precious food have I even eaten that you feel the need to interrogate me, to mock Tyler just to humiliate me? She went into a full meltdown, real tears welling up and streaming down her face. She began pounding her chest with both fists, putting on an Oscar-worthy performance of tragedy. Oh dear God in heaven. My husband died too soon, leaving me to suffer this humiliation. I carried this boy for 9 months, ibbled for him. And now he brings home a wife, and they team up to throw me out on the street. I should just die and rid you both of the burden. I remained seated, my arms crossed, my eyes ice cold. I didn't flinch. I offered no defense, no soothing words. I just silently watched the cheap soap opera unfolding in front of me. Her extreme overreaction was completely unnatural. It looked far more like a criminal terrified of being exposed than a mother-in-law whose feelings were simply hurt. Kevin panicked and grabbed his mother's arm. Mom, stop! We're just having dinner, why are you screaming? Harper just asked a simple question, nobody is kicking you out. Shut up, you whipped coward. I have no son. Susan violently shoved Kevin's arm away, stormed down the hall, and slammed the nursery door so hard the walls shook, locking it with a loud click. From inside, the muffled sounds of dramatic sobbing and bitter cursing echoed periodically. Dinner was entirely ruined. I quietly stood up, cleared the plates, and wiped down the marble counters. Kevin walked out onto the balcony, lighting a cigarette in the humid night air, his silhouette looking incredibly lonely and burdened. That night, in our bedroom, the sound of the rain lashing against the glass served as the background to our hushed conversation. Don't you see how bizarre that was? I asked, lying on my side, my head resting on Kevin's arm. She didn't explode out of pride. She exploded out of fear. The second I mentioned Tyler's house, her eyes darted everywhere, her hands shook. She and Tyler are hiding something massive. A woman as prideful as your mother, who brags about Tyler to everyone, wouldn't willingly lock herself in an overpriced birdcage for a month. The broken AC was just a cover story. Kevin crushed his cigarette stub into an ashtray and exhaled a gray plume of smoke. His brow furrowed deeply, his jaw clenched tight. Are you saying my mom is hiding something about the family house? I guarantee it. And it has everything to do with Tyler, I said with absolute certainty. Tyler hasn't called you once. He hasn't even called to check on his own mother, which is completely out of character for someone who constantly begs for money. Kevin, take a half day off work tomorrow. Drive down to the valley. Go to your mom's house and see what's actually going on. Talk to the neighbors. Kevin fell silent. My sharp analysis hit him like a bucket of ice water, awakening the suspicions that his sense of duty had kept buried. His stomach churned. The intuition of the neglected child told him that his mother hadn't just come here to escape a heat wave. The next morning, the air in our condo was thick and suffocatingly quiet. Susan kept the nursery door locked, barricading herself inside. There was no shuffling off slippers, no dramatic coughing, no demanding orders. Her silence wasn't a sign of remorse, it was a temporary ceasefire from someone calculating their next move. I put on my makeup, slipped into an ivory silk blouse and my usual Prada heels. Before walking out the door to head to my firm, I looked back at Kevin. He was standing on the balcony, nursing a cup of black coffee, his eyes blankly staring down at the endless gridlock of LA morning traffic. "I called in sick for the morning," Kevin said, his voice gravelly. He didn't turn to look at me. "I'm driving down to the valley. I'm going to the house to figure out what the hell is going on." "I hope it's not as bad as we think," I replied, walking over and placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder before quietly leaving for work. Around 9:00 a.m., Kevin pulled his Tesla out of our parking garage and merged onto the 101 freeway, heading toward his childhood neighborhood. It was the place where he was born and raised, a modest mid-century suburban ranch house tucked away on a quiet cul-de-sac. It was a house that held memories of financial struggle, but also peace before his father passed away before Susan's. Blatant favoritism became the knife that carved up his soul. As he turned onto the familiar street, the scent of blooming jasmine mixed with the dry California dust hit him. But what met his eyes was not the familiar peeling paint of his family home. The first shock hit Kevin like a sledgehammer. His mother's house was gone. In its place was an active, chaotic construction site. The old walls had been demolished, and piles of broken concrete and splintered wood blocked the driveway. Several construction workers in neon vests were sweating in the sun, operating a loud backhoe, tearing up the earth. Kevin froze, his legs turning to jelly. He had to grip the steering wheel, so hard his knuckles turned white. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he had driven down the wrong street. But no, the massive old oak tree on the curb was still there. Only the house that held his father's ashes had been completely wiped off the map. Kevin threw the car into park, stumbled out, and sprinted into the middle of the debris, grabbing the arm of a foreman in a hard hat. His voice cracked with panic. "What the hell are you doing? Who gave you permission to bulldoze my mother's house?" The foreman jumped back, irritated, and shoved Kevin's hand away. "Are you crazy, buddy? What mother? We were hired by an LLC developer to tear this down for a new mega mansion. You barge in here causing a scene, I'm calling LAPD." Just then, a man in his 50s, wearing a polo shirt and expensive sunglasses, walked over from the street. He looked Kevin up and down. "Kevin? What are you screaming about? I bought this lot. Where is my mother? Where is Susan?" Kevin demanded. "Susan? She sold this property to my firm 2 months ago for $850,000 in cash. Escrow closed, the deed is in my name, signed and stamped. She took the money and cleared out weeks ago. Why are you showing up here asking me?" Kevin's ears rang. The roar of the backhoe faded into the distance, replaced by a high-pitched ringing, shattering his brain. "Sold the house. 2 months ago. 85万美元." The words looped in his head like a broken record. He stumbled backward, his heel catching on a piece of broken concrete, and he collapsed hard onto a pile of dirt. His mother had sold the only family home they had, the house that held his father's memorial, without breathing a single word to her youngest son. And then she packed her bags, showed up at his luxury condo, faked a power outage, and demanded that he and his wife serve her like royalty. The naked, brutal truth was laid bare right in front of him, ripping away every layer of hypocritical morality. Blood rushed to Kevin's head. He clenched his fists in the dirt, grinding his teeth. The rage began to incinerate every cell in the normally gentle man's body. Kevin didn't remember how he dragged himself out of that construction site. His legs felt like lead. His mind was spinning in a vortex of betrayal and deceit. He stumbled down the block and slumped onto a bench at a local strip mall diner. The owner, Barb, had run the diner since Kevin was in elementary school. Her counter was the neighborhood gossip hub, no secret escaped her. Seeing Kevin looking pale as a ghost, his designer slacks covered in dust, Barb slid a glass of ice water toward him and sighed heavily. "Just figured it out, huh, kiddo? Poor guy. I thought you knew." Did Susan really keep you in the dark? Kevin looked up, his eyes bloodshot, clinging to Barb like a drowning man, to a life raft. Barb, please, what exactly happened? Why did my mom sell the house? Why did she move in with me without saying a word? And what about Tyler? He has a massive house right down the street. Why didn't she go stay with him? Barb leaned over the counter, lowering her voice, though every word cut like a scalpel. Lord. You really don't know? Your precious golden boy brother destroyed everything. He got heavily into crypto leverage and offshore sports betting. He racked up over $800,000 in debt to some serious, dangerous Russian bookies. Last month, a bunch of huge guys covered in tattoos showed up in black SUVs and blocked the whole cul-de-sac. Tyler went into hiding, leaving his wife and your mother to deal with the fallout. The thugs told them if the money wasn't paid, Tyler was going to end up in a shallow grave in the desert. Barb's words were like drill bits, driving straight into Kevin's chest. He gasped for air. Tyler, Susan's ultimate pride and joy, the one she always bragged was a brilliant entrepreneur, was nothing but a degenerate gambling addict. Then what happened, Barb? Kevin stammered, his throat bone dry. What do you think? Your mom panicked, crying and screaming to the heavens. She sold the house to a cash buyer developer for $850,000 in a fire sale, just to get the cash to save her precious son and pay off the mobsters. After that, she moved into Tyler's big house with him and his wife. Barb took a sip of her own coffee before continuing. She was there for exactly a month. I don't know what kind of massive blowout they had, but I guess she couldn't take living with them. Next thing I know, I see her dragging her suitcase down the street. I figured the only place she could go was up to your fancy place in the city. A freezing chill ran down Kevin's spine. Every puzzle piece clicked together perfectly. The reason Susan snapped when Harper mentioned Tyler's house. The reason she locked herself in the room crying. The reason she used the blackout excuse to move into our condo. It wasn't because she missed her youngest son, nor did she want to visit us, she simply had nowhere else to go. And Kevin, the son she had trampled on and despised since childhood, was once again turned into her emotional dumping ground, her last life preserver when she was drowning in the mud. She sold a nearly $1 million home, didn't give Kevin a single cent, didn't even notify him. But the moment she hit rock bottom, she felt perfectly entitled to demand Kevin provide for her, forcing him and his wife to endure her toxic abuse under the guise of family duty. The resentment peaked, morphing into a terrifying, cold smile on Kevin's lips. He stood up abruptly, tossed a $20 bill on the counter, and said, "Keep the change." He got into his car and sped off into the blistering midday heat. There wasn't a cloud in the LA sky, but inside Kevin, a Category 5 hurricane was forming. It was time for all the debts and lies to be settled. At 12:00 p.m., I received a brief text from Kevin, "Take the afternoon off. Come home immediately. We have a situation." My intuition told me Susan's rotten facade had finally been blown wide open. I immediately cleared my schedule and caught an Uber straight to the condo. When I pushed open the door, the tension in the living room was strung tight as a wire. Susan was sitting comfortably on the sofa, eating a slice of watermelon. Her eyes glued to a reality TV show. She looked smug and unbothered, as if the earth-shattering argument from last night had never happened. Opposite her stood Kevin. Both of his hands were shoved deep into his pockets. His face washingly cold, the blue veins pulsing at his temples. The look he gave his mother held no patience, no sympathy from an obedient son, only pure disgust mixed with fury. Seeing me walk in, Susan rolled her eyes and sneered. "Wow. What's gotten into you two? Ditching work in the middle of the day? Afraid I'm going to steal the silverware while you're gone?" Kevin completely ignored her sarcasm. He pulled his phone from his pocket, pulled up a photo he had taken of the construction site where his childhood home used to be, and slammed the phone face up onto the glass coffee table right in front of her. The sharp smack made Susan jump. The watermelon slipped from her hand and hit the floor. Is the AC still broken? Or did the whole house just evaporate? Kevin's voice rumbled like thunder in the living room. Susan looked down at the photo. In a single second, her healthy complexion turned a sickly gray. Her lips trembled violently, she couldn't form a single word. Her usually sharp eyes widened in sheer terror, darting around looking for an escape route. She realized that the naive, obedient son she thought she easily controlled had just unearthed her filthy truth. You spied on me? You went down there to investigate your own mother? Susan stammered, desperately trying to salvage her last shred of authority by raising her voice. Spy? Investigate? Don't use those words to cover up your absolute cruelty, Kevin ground out, taking a step forward, trapping Susan against the edge of the sofa. Tyler owed bookies $800,000. You sold the family home to save him, got kicked out of his house, and had the audacity to drag your bags up here to leech off my wife and me. You sold the house with Dad's memorial, and it to bail out your golden boy. Did you consult me for even a second? Have you ever even looked at me as your son? Fully exposed, Susan's mask of righteous indignation crumbled to dust. Knowing she couldn't deny it, she instantly switched to her oldest playbook, playing the victim and crying. She slid off the sofa onto the floor, slapping the hardwood with both hands, and began wailing in that ear-piercing pitch designed to break people down. Oh, Jesus. You're framing me. Your brother had a minor business setback, I had to help him. Blood is thicker than water. Was I supposed to watch the mob break his legs? It was my money, my house. I had the right to sell it. Now I haven a thing, I'm all alone. I gave birth to you, I raised you. Now that I'm down on me luck and came to you for shelter, you're going to abandon me? You ungrateful wretch. You listened to that bitch of a wife of yours to turn against your own mother, didn't you? She pointed a shaking finger directly at me, her eyes burning with venom. I stood leaning against the wall with my arms crossed, letting out a dark chuckle. Her words were pathetic. A woman who spent her whole life draining her youngest son to fund her oldest parasite. And when the oldest kicked her to the curb, she ran to the youngest demanding family loyalty. Her audacity was borderline supernatural. But I didn't say a word. I knew the stage belonged to Kevin. His decisive action would be the ultimate lethal blow. Susan's screaming echoed through the condo, shrill and incredibly manipulative. But this time, her crocodile tears couldn't soften Kevin's heart. His endurance had reached its absolute limit. The little boy who rode his bike in the freezing grain, who ate the gristle, who begged for a shred of maternal affection, that boy was dead. Standing before Susan was a cold, grown man defending his actual family. Kevin didn't help her up. He looked down at her with a terrifying apathy. He lowered his voice, pronouncing every word with lethal clarity. Shut up, Mom. Stop using the fact that you gave birth to me as a shield for your sickening favoritism. You sold the house for nearly $1 million. You didn't give May a dime, and I don't care. It was your money to give away. But your mistake was stripping away my basic right to be respected, and then having the shamelessness to run here and force me to suffer the consequences of Tyler's stupidity. Susan stopped mid-wail, the fake sobs catching in her throat. For the first time in her life, she witnessed her youngest son fight back with catastrophic force. You called this condo a birdcage. You insulted my wife. You destroyed things in your unborn grandchild's nursery. You treated us like your personal servants to vent your anger because Tyler threw you out, Kevin continued, each sentence driving a nail into Susan's shredded ego. Fine. You want to talk about family rules? I'll give you family rules. I won't throw you out on the street, because, unfortunately, you are my mother. But from this second forward, as long as you live under my roof, you live by my laws. Kevin pointed a stiff finger at the coffee table, delivering his ultimatum. Number 1. You are not a queen here. You are perfectly healthy. Starting tomorrow, you clean up after yourself and do your own laundry. My wife works to build our future, she is not your maid. Number 2. You eat whatever is put in front of you. If you complain about the food, you can go out and buy your own. Number 3. And this is the most important one. Do not ever bring anyone into this apartment. If you violate a single one of these rules, I will personally throw your Samsonite out into the hallway, and you can go rot for all I care." Susan was stunned, her eyes wide with sheer terror. She couldn't believe Harrers. Kevin, the gentle, passive son who always bowed his head, was dictating terms and threatening to throw her out. She opened her mouth to curse him out, to hurl every profanity she knew, but looking into the dead, icy stare of Herson, she swallowed the insults. She knew Kevin meant every single word, and the bitter reality was that she was penniless. She had handed over her last dollar to her degenerate oldest son. She had nowhere else to go but this birdcage she so deeply despised. She slowly crawled up from the floor, brushing off her pants, her face dark with fury. She wiped her tears, ground her teeth, and hissed, "Fine. You're real tough now. You've got your wings, and I'm just a helpless old woman. I'll be your live-in maid. I guess this is just my cross to bear." With that, she turned her back, marched into the guest room, and slammed the door. The first battle was over. The hypocritical mask had been shredded. And the ultimatum was set. But knowing Susan's selfish, vindictive nature, I knew this compliance was just a stepping stone for a series of petty, covert retaliations. From that day on, our condo entered a cold war. On the surface, Susan seemed to follow the rules. She didn't scream, throw tantrums, or demand I wait on her hand and foot. But deep down, a woman with a queen complex would never accept being stripped of her power. Unable to attack head-on, she resorted to guerrilla warfare, petty, dirty little tricks, with one single goal: to inflict maximum psychological torture on me. One Monday morning, I opened my closet to get ready for a huge presentation, only to find that my $400 silk blouse and anniversary gift from Kevin had been turned into a tie-dye disaster. Susan had intentionally washed my delicate white silk with a cheap pair of her bleeding red sweatpants. Worse, she ran it on a heavy-duty hot cycle, causing the silk to shrink, pill, and turn a hideous, blotchy neon pink. I carried the ruined blouse into the living room. Susan was sitting there, pretending to fold laundry. Seeing me, she feigned shock and slapped her leg. "Oh, my goodness. My eyes are getting so bad in my old age. I didn't see your shirt in there when I did my load. I was just trying to help out with the chores. You're a successful executive, surely you won't hold a grudge against a clumsy old woman over one shirt, right?" She offered an apology, but the corner of her mouth twitched with a smug smirk. Her eyes practically danced with provocation. She was desperately waiting for me to lose my mind and scream, so she could play the victim and accuse me of being an abusive daughter-in-law over a piece of clothing. But she miscalculated. I am not the type of woman to be easily baited by cheap tricks. I looked her dead in the eyes and smiled a thoroughly frigid smile. I walked over to the kitchen trash can and dropped the expensive silk blouse right in, watching her jaw drop. "It's totally fine, Susan. It's just an object. But from now on, you wash your clothes, and I will wash mine. Your eyesight is failing, trying to help only causes destruction. If an outsider saw this, they might think you maliciously ruined your daughter-in-law's clothes on purpose, and that would just be sound fair to your reputation." I enunciated every word, my tone soft but carrying maximum lethal intent, piercing right through her toxic facade. Susan's face darkened, her throat tightening so much she couldn't speak. It didn't stop there. Forbidden from criticizing my cooking, Susan insisted on cooking dinner on days I worked late. What she served became biological warfare. Her meatloaf was so loaded with salt, it tasted like a lick block for cattle. One bite made my tongue go numb. Her pasta was boiled into a mushy, watery sludge that tasted like dirty dishwater. That evening, Kevin took a bite of the meatloaf, grimaced, and was about to say something. I lightly kicked his shin under the table, signaling him to stay quiet. I calmly stood up, walked to the freezer, and popped a Hot Pocket into the microwave. I sat back down and casually ate my frozen meal, completely ignoring the toxic waste my mother-in-law had plated. "This is so salty, Susan. I guess your taste buds are fading with age. I'll just eat this. It's easier. Make sure you eat all of that meatloaf so it doesn't go to waste." It's a sin to throw away food, I said dryly. I wanted her to know that her sabotage would only backfire on her. I wouldn't touch her poison, and I would force her to swallow the uselessness she had created. But her petty games continued. The next day, just after I had finished swiffering the expensive European oak floors, Susan carried a heavy mop bucket out of the bathroom. She accidentally tripped on the threshold, hurling a gallon of filthy, soapy water directly across the gleaming wood in the living room, right where I was walking. The floor was instantly a slick, wet hazard. If I hadn't reflexively jumped back, I would have slipped and cracked my head open. Oops. Butterfingers. I'm getting so old and clumsy, Susan fake apologized, though her eyes remained locked on my feet, disappointed I hadn't fallen. I stared at the puddle of dirty water spreading across the expensive wood. My patience had flatlined. I stepped around the puddle, walked into the bathroom, grabbed a stack of heavy-duty towels, and shoved them hard into Susan's chest. If you're old and clumsy, you shouldn't be carrying buckets. But you spilled this water, so you will clean it up. Hardwood floors warp if water sits on them. Replacing the flooring in this condo costs around $40,000. If you don't dry this up immediately, I will deduct the contractor's bill directly from whatever allowance Kevin plans to give you. I stood over her with my arms crossed, acting as a warden, completely unbothered by her face turning purple with rage. Susan ground her teeth and angrily dropped to her knees, scrubbing the floor with the towels, wiping up every drop of water. She finally realized that my retaliation wasn't loud, but it was a chokehold. I forced her to pay the price for every single dirty trick. However, these petty squabbles were just the tip of the iceberg. While Kevin and I were busy swatting away her ridiculous antics, we had no idea that behind that locked guest room door, a vicious, parasitic scheme was being hatched, one that was preparing to plunge our lives into an absolute nightmare. For corporate professionals like Kevin and me, the end of the quarter is a bloodbath. My PR firm was drowning in campaign launches, endless KPI reports, and back-to-back strategy meetings that stretched from dawn until dusk, draining every ounce of our energy. We left the condo at 7:00 a.m. before the LA smog even burned off, and dragged ourselves back only when the city lights were glaring, our bodies exhausted and our minds fried. We wanted one simple thing, a quiet sanctuary to rest and leave the hustle at the door. But that simple desire became a luxury the moment Susan moved in. After the ultimatum, Susan appeared to shrink back. She didn't scream, throw tantrums, or demand to be waited on. She quietly fumbled through chores, weaponizing her incompetence to annoy us. But a woman's intuition, especially one who has seen the devastating effects of toxic favoritism, told me this silence wasn't a surrender. It was the terrifying calm of the ocean receding before a tsunami. Selfish, manipulative people do not give up easily. If they can't break down the front door, they will dig a tunnel to dynamite the foundation. Red flags began popping up everywhere. Susan became permanently attached to Heraphone. Before, she would blast daytime talk shows or game shows on our OLED TV. Now, the condo was suspiciously silent. Some nights, when I walked through the door, she would frantically shove her phone behind her back, a guilty jolt flashing across her wrinkled face. Her eyes would dart around like a thief caught red-handed. She'd quickly grab a microfiber cloth and start furious wiping down a perfectly clean counter just to look busy. My suspicions grew, and I started paying attention to the smallest details. Laddie, at night, long after Kevin and I had gone to bed, I kept hearing a faint, rapid whispering coming from the nursery. The heavy door muffled the sound, but her shrill, panicked cadence was unmistakable. Susan was locking herself in, pulling the covers over her head, and making phone calls. A few times, while walking to the kitchen for water, I caught fragmented, chilling phrases. The cartel guys. Just sell the place. Move up here. Kevin won't. Those fragments stitched together into a terrifying picture, making my chest tight with dread. Kevin noticed the change in his mother too. He didn't say anything, but the crease between his brows deepened. He was exhausted. The emotional wound of her massive betrayal was still bleeding, leaving him with no energy to interrogate her again. He chose to ignore it, telling himself she had cut ties with Tyler and was just complaining to her old neighborhood friends. He drastically underestimated his mother's greed and blind devotion. I refused to wait around as a sitting duck. One weekend, while Susan was down at the gym, I installed a stealthwise camera hidden inside a decorative bookshelf in the living room. It was this camera that later revealed the entire origin of the incoming horror show. When I eventually pulled the footage, the scene that played out froze the blood in my veins. The moment our front door clicked shut, the frail, fumbling old woman vanished. Susan threw her Swiffer to the floor, strutted over to the sofa, and initiated a FaceTime call. The camera didn't catch the phone screen, but the high-definition microphone captured every toxic, calculated word spoken by Tiffany, my trashy sister-in-law, on the other end. Her voice was shrill, entitled, and dripping with malice. Susan. The loan sharks showed up at the motel again looking for Tyler. This place is a dump, there are roaches everywhere, and Brayden has a terrible cough. You have to do something. You're living in Kevin's luxury high-rise, it has 24/7 security and key fob elevators. Those thugs can't get up there, you need to open the door and let us move in. Susan's response held zero hesitation. She was entirely complicit. But Kevin is being ruthless. He laid down the law and explicitly forbade me from bringing you guys up here. His wife is a nightmare. She doesn't yell, but she's venomous. If I sneak you in, what if they throw me out on the street too? Oh, give me a break, Tiffany scoffed, reeking of manipulation. You gave birth to him. Is he really going to have LAPD drag his own mother out? Just pick a day when they are both stuck at the office. Open the door, and we'll move all our stuff in. Once we're unpacked, it's done. Squatters' rights. They can't legally kick us out right away. Just throw yourself on the floor, cry, bring up how much you sacrificed for him. Family is family. If he lives in a multi-million-dollar condo and lets his own brother die on the streets, he'll be cancelled by every he knows. Just listen to me. Secure the beachhead first, we'll figure out the rest later. Susan hesitated for a few seconds before nodding enthusiastically. Okay. Pack your bags. Next Tuesday, they have a massive corporate pitch. They won't be home until late. I'll text you when the coast is clear. That Tuesday morning, the LA sky was uncharacteristically gray, smothered by a thick marine layer. Exactly as Susan had overheard. Kevin and I had the biggest pitch meeting of the year, a make-or-break presentation for our respective divisions. The crushing pressure forced us out the door at 6:00 a.m., lugging heavy briefcases. I wore a sharp black tailored suit, my hair in a severe bun, hiding my exhaustion under layers of flawless makeup. When our heavy apartment door clicked shut, I had no idea a disgusting play was being set into motion behind it. According to the camera footage I reviewed later, the second our elevator descended, Susan sprang from the guest bed like she was launched from a cannon. There was no trace of the aching 6-0-year-old. She quickly ran a comb through her wiry hair, dabbed some pale powder on her face to look sickly, and dialed her phone. Tiffany? They're gone. Hurry up, I'll bring the service elevator down to the garage to sneak you in before the concierge sees. Susan hissed, her voice vibrating with the thrill of a mole, betraying her own son's fortress. Through the camera lens, the invasion of the parasites was captured in all its grotesque, trashy glory. The front door swung open, and an entire horde of people barged into my elegant, minimalist sanctuary. Leading the pack was Tiffany. She was wearing a hot pink velour tracksuit, her bleached blonde hair a frayed, frizzy mess, her face caked in cheap, smudged makeup. Her thin lips stretched into a massive grin as her greedy eyes scanned the massive living room, taking in the restoration hardware sofa, the 5.4-inch OLED TV, and the crystal chandelier. Damn, little bro is living like a king up here. Sure beats that rat-infested motel, Tiffany squawked loudly, casually tossing her peeling faux leather Michael Kors tote bag right onto my custom glass coffee table. Following Tiffany was Tyler the golden boy, Susan's ultimate pride. Far from the image of a successful tech bro Susan painted him as. Tyler looked like a walking corpse. He was emaciated, with dark, sunken bags under his eyes, wearing a stained graphic tee that showed off faded, cheap tribal tattoos. Tyler was shawling a massive, filthy black garbage bag filled with pots, pans, and junk that clattered loudly. He didn't bother taking off his mud-caked Air Force 1s, stomping directly onto my imported white sheepskin rug. Finally, there was Brayden, their 9-year-old menace of a son. He was a pudgy, disrespectful iPad kid, clutching a melting chocolate ice cream bar. The second he saw my pristine cream-colored sofa, he let out a feral screech and vaulted onto the cushions, jumping up and down, letting globs of melted chocolate drip directly onto the Italian leather. Susan slammed the door shut, exhaling a massive sigh of relief, smiling like a victorious general who had just saved her royal bloodline. She opened her arms wide. "Come in. Come in. Make yourselves at home. From now on, you live here with me. It's 3 bedrooms. Why should you rot in a motel while the cartel hunts you?" Susan practically tripped over herself to help Tyler carry his filthy garbage bag. She completely ignored the mud tracks on the floor. She didn't care that Brayden was smearing chocolate on the furniture. In her eyes, as long as her golden child was safe and comfortable, Kevin's home could be burned to the ground, and she would deem it a worthy sacrifice. My luxury condo, where I dusted every surface and curated every piece of art, was turned into a trashy trap house in less than 30 minutes. Tyler and Tiffany raided my Sub-Zero fridge, pulling out my expensive organic fruit, charcuterie meats, and sparkling water, throwing a chaotic picnic on the kitchen island. They ate like animals, laughing hysterically, treating the actual owners of the home like non-existent ghosts. The invasion was a total success. The parasites had fully attached their feeding tubes into the heart of my family, prepping for the ultimate hostile takeover. Susan hovered around them, personally pouring a glass of fresh squeezed orange juice for Brayden, before sitting next to Tyler, stroking his sunken face. Every second of their venomous conversation was recorded in high definition. "So? Do you feel safe now? This building has 24/7 armed security. There's no way those loan sharks can get past the lobby." Susan beamed, acting like she was bestowing a royal pardon. Tyler leaned back in the bar stool, let out a loud burp, and smacked his lips. "It's safe, sure. But we can't hide in this apartment forever, Ma. If they are circling the block downstairs, I can't even go out to hustle. Man, this place is insane though. Custom oak, leather, high-end tech. Kevin hit the jackpot marrying a corporate bitch making real money. Better life than me." He let out a fake, dramatic sigh, shooting a calculating look at his wife. Tiffany caught the cue immediately. She smirked, tossing a grape stem onto the floor. She leaned closer to Susan. "Look, Susan, like we talked about, that $850,000 you got from the house was just a drop in the bucket. Tyler didn't just lose money on crypto, he went to some heavy underground Vegas guys trying to win it back, so he could buy your house back. He lost it all. He took out an additional $1.5 million from the Russian mob. The interest is compounding daily. They took our house, but it didn't cover the spread. If we don't hand them $400,000 inches cash by the end of the month, Tyler is a dead man. Good thing we thought to get you in here first, so we had a way in." Hearing the number $400,000, Susan's face contorted. Her jaw dropped, her sharp eyes bulging in terror. She grabbed Tyler's arm and shook him. "Dear God in heaven. What are you saying? 400 grand? Are you trying to kill me? Where am I supposed to get that kind of money? I'm tapped out. I bled myself dry for you. I came up here just to hold the spot so you had a place to hide. What more do you want?" Susan started to hyperventilate. But her panic was cut off by Tiffany, slapping the counter. The sheer audacity of a cornered rat left no room for pity. Tiffany leaned into her mother-in-law's face, her voice dropping to a serpentine hiss. "Are you stupid? You're broke, but Kevin isn't. Look around, we are inside the gates. A penthouse in DTLA? This place is easily worth $2.5 million. You are his mother. You tell him to sell this condo and use the equity to pay off his brother's debt. Saving a life is the ultimate Christian duty, they are blood. A house is just a material object." Susan froze, stammering. But this place is Kevin and Harper's life savings. Harper's parents put down the deposit. Harper is ruthless. She won't give up a single dime. How can I force him to sell? Oh, who cares about the daughter-in-law? Tiffany sneered, her eyes flashing with pure malice. The husband's property is the mother's property. Use your guilt trips. Remind him how much you sacrificed. Kevin has been a weak little pushover desperate for your approval since he was a kid. If you push hard enough, threaten to jump off the balcony in front of him, I bet you he caves. As for the wife, let me handle her. We are going to trash this place. We will live here like pigs, blast music, and scream at them day and night until they lose their minds. When she finally breaks and files for divorce, the house is all ours. We force the sale, pay the Russians, and buy a nice house out in Texas to live in peace. Tyler nodded in agreement. She's right, Ma. Family is family. He's my little brother, he owes me. He gets to live in a penthouse with a hot wife while his own flesh and blood gets chopped up by the cartel? You think he could live with that guilt? Just do what Tiffany says. Claim the house, kick the bitch out. So, there it was. It was premeditated. The conspiracy to steal our home washatched before Susan ever dragged her suitcase through our door. They were unspeakably cruel, devoid of any human empathy. They weren't just parasites, they were a flock of vultures waiting to pick the bones of their own family clean. After a few minutes of panic, Susan nodded, fully agreeing to her daughter-in-law's demonic plan. At 7:30 p.m., Kevin and I stepped out of the elevator. The subtle scent of the hallway's ambient citrus diffuser couldn't mask the soul-crushing fatigue weighing down our bones. My pitch was a massive success, but the cost was total physical and mental depletion. Kevin's tie was loose, his eyes red from staring at screens. I had taken off my heels and was carrying them, wanting nothing more than to stand under a scalding shower and collapse into our premium mattress. But the moment Kevin turned the key and the heavy door opened, a foul stench assaulted my nostrils, making me gag and step back. It was a vile mixture of stale beer, cheap weed, greasy fast food, and the distinct smell of unwashed bodies. Kevin frowned and pushed the door wide open. The horrifying scene that assaulted our eyes felt like boiling water poured directly onto our brains. My elegant, minimalist condo, my crystal lighting gone. In its place was a chaotic, trashed war zone. Right at the entryway, a dozen pairs of filthy, mud-caked sneakers were piled up, actively crushing my designer heels. Black garbage bags and grimy cardboard boxes were stacked from the foyer deep into the living room. Dirty laundry, including women's cheap lingerie and rank socks, was draped over the dining chairs and the arms of my sofa. But the sight that made the blood boil and rush to my head was in the center of the living room. Braden, Susan's 9-year-old golden grandson, was standing on me custom glass coffee table, jumping up and down like a wild animal. He had a black, permanent Sharpie in his hand and was aggressively scribbling dark, jagged lines all over my expensive, imported silk wallpaper. Worse, the cushions of my $10,000 restoration hardware leather sofa were punctured with pen hole sand covered in profane doodles. Sprawled out on that ruined sofa were Tyler and Tiffany, relaxing like they owned the place. Tyler was in a pair of stained gym shorts, his flabby stomach hanging out, playing a loud, obnoxious shooter game on his phone. Tiffany had dragged my expensive down comforter out of the master bedroom and was wrapped in it, loudly cracking sunflower seeds and spitting the shells directly onto my white sheepskin rug. The TV volume was maxed out, playing a trashy reality show. Fake canned laughter echoed piercingly through the room. Meanwhile, Susan was in the kitchen, violently chopping something on a wooden board with a meat cleaver. Grease and meat fragments were flying everywhere, landing on the quartz countertops I polished every night. What the fuck is going on here? Kevin roared, his voice cracking under the sheer weight of his fury. He slammed his briefcase onto the floor, stormed into the living room, and swiped the bowl of sunflower seeds off the table, sending it crashing to the floor. The TV went mute. Braden jumped, dropped the Sharpie, and started fake crying, sprinting into his mother's arms. Tiffany slowly sat up, running a hand through her fried hair, looking entirely unapologetic. She smirked, shooting us a look of pure, unadulterated entitlement and defiance. Tyler casually pulled his legs down and sat up, but kept up his thug persona, lazily scratching his gut. Susan rushed out of the kitchen, still clutching the greasy meat cleaver. Shep put on a panicked expression, but her eyes glinted with the stubbornness of a zealot ready for a holy war. She stepped between Kevin and her golden child, glaring at her youngest son, initiating the final act of her manipulation. My exhaustion vanished instantly, replaced by a terrifying, icy calm. I crossed my arms and took a step back, waiting to see what twisted, fake Christian morality these daytime robbers would use to justify their home invasion. The air in the room froze, thick with hostility and sheer audacity. Kevin stood like a statue in the center of the room. His eyes were bloodshot, his chest heaving violently, resembling a wounded predator desperately trying to hold onto its last shred of sanity before tearing its enemies apart. His hands curled into tight fists, trembling as he pointed at the piles of garbage and thesmug faces on the sofa. Who gave them permission to step foot in here? Who gave them the right to destroy my home? Did you forget what I told you? Kevin's voice was a low, guttural growl squeezing through his teeth, every syllable loaded with explosive restraint. Susan didn't flinch. Hyped up on the delusion fed to her by Tiffany, she immediately shifted into attack mode. She threw the cleaver onto the floor with a loud clang, slapped her thigh, and started shrieking in her grating voice, "I gave them permission. I am your mother. I brought you into this world. You only have this fancy apartment because of the good karma of this family. Your brother fell on hard times, the mob took his house, he's backed into a corner. Blood is thicker than water. You're his brother. You have a luxury penthouse, you live like a king, and you're going to watch your own flesh and blood die in the gutter? Do you have no soul?" She stepped forward, jabbing a finger hard into Kevin's chest, crying and screaming, "I sold everything to save him, and it wasn't enough. The cartel is threatening to dismember him. His family moved up here for sanctuary, to save their lives. I've made my decision. Tyler, Tiffany, and Brayden are staying here. If you can afford to house me, you can afford to house your brother. If you want to kick him out, you'll have to step over my dead body." Susan's words flowed out perfectly rehearsed, reeking of extreme emotional blackmail. She weaponized her own life and the concept of motherhood to aim directly at Kevin's weakest point, his desperate need to be a good son. At this point, Tiffany casually smoothed her velour jacket and chimed in with her fake sweet, venomous voice, "Kev. Your mom is right. You and your wife have been living high on the hog in the city, so long, you forgot what family means. It's a 3-bedroom place. You guys don't even have kids yet, what do you need all this space for? It's just family staying for a bit. We'll share meals, you girls will cook and clean together. The house will be full of love. Why are you acting like the place is on fire? Or is Harper just a greedy bitch who is forcing you to turn your back on your brother?" She intentionally directed the crosshairs at me, flashing a provocative half-smile. Tyler chimed in too, "Chill out, bro. Once I hit my next big parlay, I'll buy you 10 of these ugly couches. We're blood. Why are you counting pennies like a loser?" The shamelessness had reached an astronomical level. They had destroyed our home, plotted to steal our equity, and brought cartel debt to our doorstep. Yet they were playing the victims, using family values to whitewash their psychopathic greed. They were trying to force Kevin to swallow his rage, demanding he use his literal life savings to pay for Tyler's degeneracy. I leaned against the wall, entirely unfazed by Tiffany's insults. I didn't yell about the property damage, nor did I curse them out. I just silently watched Kevin. I knew this was his ultimate, defining internal battle. If he backed down today, if he broke under his mother's manipulative tears, our family would be dragged into a permanent, inescapable hell. I waited for the moment he would finally break his chains. Kevin stood as still as stone. His face was chalk white, his lips trembling so hard he bit them until they bled. Memories of his bitter childhood flooded his mind. The burnt pizza crusts, the freezing bus stops. And now, the only safe haven he had ever built for himself was being trampled by the very people who shared his DNA. 3 seconds of silence passed, a cold, suffocating silence. And then, the balloon popped. Every man has his breaking point. The sun who had been suppressed for 32 years finally detonated in an explosion of biblical fury. Kevin didn't say a single word. He sidestepped Susan faster than lightning and marched straight to the pile of trash Tyler had brought in. His veins popped as she grabbed the massive, filthy black garbage bag. With a surge of adrenaline-fueled, terrifying strength, Kevin lifted the heavy bag over his head, spun around, and hurled it straight out the open front door into the hallway. Crash! Kevin spun back, grabbed a cardboard box full of clothes, and tipped it upside down, dumping the rank, dirty laundry out into the hall. He didn't stop. He went into a frenzy, grabbing every muddy sneaker, every plastic bag of junk, and violently chucking them out the door without an ounce of hesitation. He was purging the infection from his living space with absolute, ruthless efficiency. The sudden, explosive violence stunned the parasites for a few seconds. Tiffany reacted first. She squealed like a slaughtered pig, threw off my blanket, and jumped off the sofa. "You piece of shit. You're throwing my stuff out. You think you're better than us? Tyler, kick his ass. He's trying to kill us. He's trying to put his own family on the street." Tiffany screamed, flailing her arms, spit flying from her mouth. Tyler, fueled by the rage of an embarrassed thug, charged forward. He grabbed Kevin by his tailored collar and pulled his fist back to punch his younger brother in the face. "You little bitch! You don't disrespect me. I'm your older brother, you want to die?" But Tyler was a malnourished, sleep-deprived addict. He was absolutely no match for a grown man in a state of righteous, blinding fury. Kevin simply swatted Tyler's arm away, causing the punch to hit empty air. Kevin grabbed Tyler by the collar, spun him around, and shoved him violently. Tyler lost his balance and crashed hard into the glass coffee table, letting out a pathetic yelp as he hit the floor. Seeing her golden child hit the ground, Susan let out a blood-curdling scream. She deployed her ultimate weapon, the hysterical meltdown. She threw her son to the hardwood floor, thrashing her arms and legs, her hair flying wildly as she wailed to the heavens. "Help, police! My psychotic son is breaking his brother's bones. He's murdering his mother. You ungrateful animal. You sociopath. Did I raise you to tear your family apart? I'll kill myself right there, so you have to live with the guilt forever." She crawled toward the wall, pretending she was going to bash her own head into the drywall. Brayden, seeing the adults getting violent, started screaming and dove under the dining table, shaking like a leaf. My luxury condo had devolved into an absolute ghetto, as loud and chaotic as a bar brawl. I stood leaning against the wall with my arms crossed, observing the madness with freezing eyes. I had zero intention of intervening or helping Susan up. This was Kevin's war to finish. But when Tiffany, her eyes bloodshot with rage, turned to lunge at me because of my apathetic expression, I finally spoke. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp, commanding, and cold as a razor blade. "Take one more step, and I dial 911 for breaking and entering, trespassing, and assault. My husband and I are the sole owners of this steed. You are a gang of squatters and thieves. Crying and playing the victim won't extort a single penny from me. I highly suggest you pack your trash and leave before I press felony charges." My words hit Tiffany like a bucket of ice water. She froze in her tracks, her thin lips trembling with fury, but she didn't dare step closer. The brazen confidence of these daytime robbers relied entirely on the mother-in-law's protection. But now, with the pillar of the family rejecting the matriarch, they had lost their shield. And their ultimate humiliation was only just beginning. Kevin was panting, his chest heaving violently. He kicked the remaining dirty clothes out of his way and marched straight to the intercom panel on the wall. His fingers shook, but he decisively pressed the button for the 24/7's lobby concierge. "Security. Send a team up to penthouse 1508 immediately. We have 3 unauthorized trespassers, refusing to leave, destroying property, and attempting assault. Bring enough guys to physically escort them off the premises," Kevin ordered, his voice echoing with absolute authority. Hearing the words security and escort them off the premises, Susan stopped rolling on the floor. She lifted her head, her eyes wide with unimaginable shock. She never thought Kevin would actually go nuclear and strip away her public dignity in front of the whole building. At 60 years old, her fake pride was the only thing she had left. You're calling security on me?" You animal. I am your mother. If you do this, everyone will know you are a monster. The whole family will disown you. Susan shrieked, scrambling to her feet to try and rip the intercom off the wall. Kevin swatted her hand away. The look he gave the woman who birthed him contained nothing but a hollow, sickening disgust. What family? Do you have anyone left who will even look at you? Or did they all realize you're an idiot who brought cartel debt onto yourself? You care about your pride? Good. I'll show you exactly what your pride is worth. 5 minutes later, the heavy thud of combat boots echoed down the hallway. 4 massive, uniformed private security guards carrying batons appeared at the door. At the same time, due to the massive commotion, several of our wealthy neighbors cracked their doors open to peek. Judgmental, curious eyes locked on Toppenhaus 1508, staring at the shattered bowls, the muddy shoes, and the trashy clothes scattered everywhere. Kevin pointed directly at Tyler, Tiffany, and Susan, speaking clearly to the head of security. These 3 adults and the child broke into my home. I want them escorted down to the street, immediately. If they ever step foot in the lobby again, I am suing the HOA. The humiliation was absolute. Tiffany's face drained of color. She didn't dare utter another curse. Tyler shrunk down like a crushed bug, cowardly calling his son out from under the table. Only Susan tried to cling to her shredded authority. I'm not leaving. This is my son's house. You can't touch me. But faced with the intimidating security guards and the disgusted stares of the millionaire neighbors, Susan, along with her golden child and his wife, were forced to pick up their filthy garbage bags and do the walk of shame to the service elevator. The elevator doors slid shut, permanently severing a toxic, blood-soaked bond. When they were gone and the neighbors dispersed, Kevin walked back inside. The heavy oak door closed, locking the chaos out. He stood in the middle of the ruined living room, looking at the Sharpie marks on the sofa and the gouges in the wallpaper. And then, like a massive oak tree chopped at the roots, he collapsed onto the floor. The man who was just a raging tiger curled in himself, buried his face in his hands, and wept uncontrollably. Gut-wrenching, agonizing sobs ripped from the depths of his soul, the tears of a son who had to personally amputate his own family tree. Kevin cried for his starved childhood, for his wasted sacrifices, and for the agonizing realization that he was effectively an orphan, even though his mother was still breathing. I walked over, knelt beside him, and wrapped my arms around his shake shoulders. I stroked his messy hair, offering no empty platitudes. I just held him tight, letting my warmth thaw the freezing despair in his heart. Let it out, Kevin. Cry it all out tonight, and tomorrow we start fresh. Cutting out a tumor is agonizing, but it's better to endure the pain and survive than let the cancer kill this family. The very next morning, the first thing I did was hire a locksmith to replace the front door lock with a state-of-the-art biometric fingerprint scanner. A professional cleaning crew sanitized the condo from top to bottom. The ruined furniture was hauled to the dump without a second thought. Kevin and I were building our boundaries, clearing the wreckage to protect our true home. But elsewhere, the swift hand of karma was just beginning to strike the villains off our story. Winter rolled into California, bringing a bitter, damp chill to the nights. While our condo returned to its warm, peaceful state, fate turned its lens on top the parasites we had thrown out. The truth of their subsequent lives I only learned through the grapevine from Barb at the diner and a few distant cousins who loved gossip. But every detail painted a flawless picture of cosmic justice. Kicked out of the luxury high-rise, penniless, and with nowhere to hide, Susan and Tyler's family were forced to flee to a desolate, run-down area in the deep Mojave Desert, renting a decaying, single-wide trailer in a sketchy park. The trailer was cramped, the walls were warped with water damage, and it reeked of meth smoke and raw sewage from a leaking septic tank. 4 people who had fantasized about stealing a multi-million-dollar penthouse were now confined to a literal slum. And at the absolute bottom of society, the true, savage nature of the parasites was exposed. Susan, who once played the imperious queen, became the ultimate punching bag for the very son and daughter-in-law she had bankrupted herself to save. Without a dime to her name, Tyler lazily rotted on a stained mattress all day, playing mobile games and hiding from the cartel. The burden of survival fell to Tiffany. A selfish sociopath like Tiffany was never going to let a 60-year-old woman sit around for free. During meals of generic canned beans and stale bread, Tiffany constantly slammed her fork down, verbally abusing her mother-in-law without a mercy. "Eat less, you useless old bat. I thought you were so good at manipulating Kevin. Turns out he treats you like garbage. He threw your stuff into the hall like trash. Because of your stupid advice, we got thrown out like dogs. You're old, but your legs work. Get out there and collect aluminum cans to pay for your keep. I'm not your maid." Tiffany would shriek, kicking a plastic cup of water so it splashed all over Susan's bare, cracked feet. Susan would sit huddled in the corner of the trailer, tears streaming down her face, trembling, not daring to argue back. She would look to Tyler for help. Thiessen she had fed the best cuts of meat. The son she sold her home for, but he would just snap, "Mom, you're annoying. Go outside so I can sleep. Tiffany is right, we're broke. Go dig through the dumpsters and find something we can pawn. Stop crying." Absolute despair pierced Susan's chest. Karma had arrived with terrifying speed. She used to look down on Kevin's loyalty. She used to demand I serve her tea. Now, she was treated like a stray dog by her favorite daughter-in-law. At 60, an age where she should be enjoying retirement, Susan was forced to put on a cheap plastic poncho and drag a garbage bag through the freezing desert. Wind, digging through dumpsters for recyclables and scrap metal. On nights, when the cold desert rain leaked through the metal roof onto her face, she would shiver under a thin, moldy blanket, listening to her golden boy snore. The image of Kevin riding his bike in the freezing rain, the image of my ruined dinner, the image of the warm, pristine condo they rushed back to tear her soul apart. Extreme remorse consumed her. She had thrown away her only diamond for a piece of shiny gravel. She had destroyed her own life, and the price was so steep that the rest of her miserable life could never pay it back. But the tragedy of that family wasn't over. The bottom of the barrel still had a trapdoor. Desperation makes people reckless, and Tyler's inherent laziness and greed pushed him into a fatal corner. Unable to handle the poverty, refusing to work a minimum wage job, and terrified of the cartel, Tyler listened to some local junkies and decided to traffic contraband. Tiffany, blinded by greed, actually acted as his middleman. They borrowed a small amount of money from a local payday loan shark to fund a massive, life-changing run, smuggling hundreds of thousands of illegal, fentanyl-laced vape cartridges and counterfeit pills across state lines to sell in inner-city high schools. They deluded themselves into believing that 3 successful runs would pay off the cartel and buy them a house. But the net of justice is wide, and nothing slips through forever. Evil always pays its tab. One foggy night in late November, Tyler and Tiffany were driving a rented U-Haul packed with deadly narcotics and illegal vapes. As they pulled up to an agricultural checkpoint near the state border, they were swarmed by DEA agents and state troopers. They were caught red-handed. The evidence was irrefutable. The smuggling ring was crushed, and cold steel handcuffs snapped around Tyler and Tiffany's wrists, ending their delusion of grandeur in the filthiest way possible. They made the local news. Images of the U-Haul filled with poison aimed at children sparked public outrage. The feds also uncovered Tyler's involvement in an interstate money laundering ring for the cartel, piling federal charges on top of state ones. The trial was swift, concluding right before Christmas. Kevin and I didn't attend, but through the grapevine, we heard it was the most pathetic day of Susan's life. She wore a tattered, oversized Goodwill coat. Hiding in the back row of the federal courtroom, withered and shaking like a dead leaf. Braden, once the spoiled, overweight terror, looked hollow and cried silently, clinging to her jacket. At the defense table, Tyler and Tiffany looked skeletal, their heads bowed, completely stripped of their arrogant swagger. The judge's gavel slammed down like a gunshot, delivering the sentence. Tyler received 12 years in federal prison for drug trafficking and money laundering. Tiffany received 4 years as an accessory. A combined 16 years. All their remaining assets were seized. Braden was handed over to Child Protective Services and eventually sent to Tiffany's estranged relatives in another state. The moment the gavel fell, Susan's legs gave out. She stared blankly at her golden child, the boy she worshipped, the boy she sacrificed her dignity and Kevin's sanity for, now wearing a neon orange jumpsuit, chained at the waist and ankles, being led away by U.S. Marshals through a heavy steel door. Her entire universe imploded. The world went black. She let out a choking gasp, the blood pressure in her brain skyrocketing, and collapsed onto the cold courtroom floor, passing out amidst the murmurs of the gallery. The pure gold she had worshipped her entire life had turned into radioactive ash, incinerating her last will to live. Susan suffered a massive stroke. She was left partially paralyzed, lying in a cheap, depressing, state-run Medicaid rehab facility. Alone. No friends, no family. The cartel didn't bother hunting down a dying old woman now that Tyler was locked away. Isolation and illness drained whatever life she had left. One freezing winter night, Susan used her remaining good hand to borrow a nurse's phone and dial Kevin's number. The line rang endlessly, feeling entirely hopeless, until finally, Kevin answered. "Kevin. Please. Save me. I'm dying." She rasped, her voice broken, coughing violently. She wept, the belated tears of absolute remorse soaking her hospital pillow. Kevin put the phone on speaker so I could hear. I saw the agonizing conflict on me husband's face. His jaw was locked, his brows drawn together in profound pain. Half of him wanted to hang up and let her pay the ultimate price for her cruelty. The other half was yanked back by the biological instinct of a son, the very thing he cherished most. I gently squeezed his hand. I nodded. No matter how much we hated her, we couldn't let a human being, let alone his mother, rot to death in a state ward. That is the baseline of our humanity. That night, Kevin arranged for a medical transport to move Susan to a slight better Medicare-approved nursing facility closer to the city. 2 days later, Susan regained full consciousness in a sterile white room. Seeing Kevin and Miss standing at the foot of her bed, she burst into agonizing sobs. She tried to drag her paralyzed body out of the bed to kneel on the linoleum floor. "Kevin. Harper. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. I was blind. I destroyed everything. Tyler is in prison, and I have nothing. Please, forgive me. Let me come live with you. I'll sleep on the floor. I'll eat your scraps. Just please, give me a roof over my head for my final years." Her tragic begging was pathetic, but it possessed no power to sway our logic anymore. Kevin gently pushed her back onto the pillows and pulled his hands away from her trembling grip. His eyes were calm, cold. There was no hatred left, but there was absolutely no unconditional love, either. "You don't need to apologize. I've let the past go. I don't hate you anymore. But my trust and my love for you are dead. You are never moving into our home. My family needs peace for the baby that is about to be born." Susan froze, the last light of hope in her eyes dying out. Kevin continued, articulating every word clearly, establishing the final, impenetrable boundary of their relationship. "I will fulfill my legal and moral duty as a son. I have set you up in a private, basic assisted living studio down the street from the hospital. I will deposit exactly $400 a month into an account for your personal incidentals. I will cover your medical deductibles, and I will occasionally visit. But you will never, ever have a key to my home, and you will never be permitted to step foot inside my house ever again." It was the most ruthless punishment, but it was also the ultimate act of mercy a profoundly traumatized son could offer. Forgiving someone does not mean giving them a front row seat to hurt you again. The boundary had been drawn with blood, tears, and absolute finality. The final image of the story rests in that small, sterile assisted living room. Susan sits alone in a wheelchair by a small window, watching the busy LA traffic blur through the winter rain. She is isolated, chewing flavorless institutional food, agonizingly digesting the price of her extreme favoritism and greed. She's alive, but she is serving a life sentence inside the prison of her own conscience. Meanwhile, miles away, in our luxury high-rise bathed in warm, ambient light, I gently rested my head against Kevin's chest. He stroked my heavily pregnant belly, smiling with genuine peace. The hurricane had passed. Our little baby would be born and raised in a home entirely free of injustice, surrounded only by clear boundaries and the fiercest, most protective love. Favoritism in a family is a slow-acting poison. It kills relationships and plants the seeds for irreversible tragedy. True family loyalty isn't about silent endurance. Sometimes, it requires the sheer courage to cut out the cancer in order to protect the home you've built.